just give you a moment to get yourself settled back again. And then I would like to ask you to do me a favor. On the count of 3, not before, but on 3, I would like you to gather up all your things, stand up, and go find a different seat. All right, so you ready for that? All right. 1, 2, yeah, okay, let's not do that. I don't really want you to stand up and find a different seat, but I'm very interested for you to take note of how you felt when you thought you'd have to find a different place to sit. Did you feel a little uncomfortable? Perhaps you had that little voice in your head going, I paid good money for that seat. I got here early so I could get the best seat. I am not moving. Or maybe you thought, I'm just going to ignore her. I'll stand up, I'll shuffle my feet a bit, and then I'll sit right back down in the same place. I mean, how many people can one woman keep her eye on? These are all common responses, and they come from the same place, your dislike of change. Now, I'm going to start first by apologizing for bringing negative reactions into the room in such an early point of the day. But you got to admit, I got your attention, didn't I? Change is a funny thing because we all experience it. And with every change comes a certain amount of stress. You might think that your lack of wanting to change comes from laziness or poor attitude or maybe even bad genetic makeup. But it's none of those things. Your reluctance to change comes from outdated programming. There are times when scientists look at all the behaviors of all the people in the world, and they've established that you have inborn universal behaviors. In other words, we could gather people from all over the world, put them in similar situations, and they'd all behave the same way. An example of that is the fight-flight response. When something threatens you, whether it's verbal, emotional, or physical, you have one of 2 reactions. You will either get very, very aggressive and get ready to fight the threat, or you will turn around, you'll run away and hide and hope that the threat can't find you. You don't get to consciously decide which of those 2 things happens. Instead, you will just have your brain do a split-second assessment of what's going on, and it will tell you what to do. This also happens when you come to change, something that's unfamiliar and different. You have an inborn instinct that tells you not to trust anything that's new or unfamiliar. 200,000 years ago on the savannah, the first Homo sapiens emerged. And it was a very, very hard survival for them. And survival is the #1 drive of all humans. To help them survive, they developed these instinctive behaviors, like the fight-flight response and the dislike of change. And it made total sense back then. Today, if you try something new that no one's ever done before and it fails, in all likelihood, you'll just chalk it up to experience. But back in the times of the primitive people, if they tried something and it didn't work, they'd probably die. It served them to distrust things that were new, but you don't live in that environment. It doesn't suit you. Just because you have a problem with this outdated programming doesn't mean you can't override the programming and take charge. Do you recognize any of these behaviors, these negative emotions, when something new and unfamiliar enters your world? Oh yeah, I love it, thank you. Because the people that can do that can make the override. Would you like to learn how to override your old programming? Yeah. You've already done the first step. That's good news. You know it exists, and you can't fix a leaky roof if you don't realize it's leaking. Now that you know that programming is there and it's not serving you, you can do something about it. Your second step is to be conscious of when it appears in your life. So look out for those times. Don't just dismiss them and think, oh, this is the way I am. This is the way we do things here. I don't like it. Can't change. Instead, take note. How do you feel when you see another building going up on that beautiful empty lot that had all the wildflowers on it? Does that annoy you? Or when you walk into your favorite restaurant, only to discover they've completely changed the menu? Do you go, yay? Or is it, what am I going to have? It's no use. I wish I hadn't come. Typical behaviors. Now, your reaction can go anywhere from a sigh all the way down to full-blown panic attack and everything in between. They are all the same sign of your resistance to change. So once you're aware these things are happening, you need to remember that you are a survivor. That is your number one drive. Don't ever forget that. We find it very difficult to move from change into something new. We love things that are familiar. And that's why so many people stay in relationships where they're not happy, or in jobs they absolutely hate. It isn't because they think that's a good idea. It's because they're scared of the unknown. What's on the other side? You're a survivor. You need to know that. It doesn't matter what the unknown is. You'll make it work. You may not know how, but you will make it work. A really good way to help yourself remember just what a survivor you are is to practice surviving. Now, how do you do that? I am not suggesting that you go throw yourself off a cliff or a bungee jump without clipping in your bungee rope well enough. I'm suggesting you do some little things that will make yourself realize just what a survivor you are. So, for example, how many people take the same route home from the shopping center or work every single day? Yes. Don't do that. Try taking a different way home. Or think, maybe I'll try the bus service or cycle. Do something different. Don't always go to your favorite restaurant. Try something new. Or are there any people in here like me that go to the same restaurant and then order the exact same thing every time they go? Stop doing that. I have to remind myself that too. Do something new. Do something adventuresome and prove to yourself that you are a survivor. You need to remind yourself every single day that it doesn't matter what the unknown brings for you, you will survive. That is your primary drive. Now, for anyone here that might be introducing change to other people, anyone in that position where they work and they're trying to bring in new policies, or you're home and you're thinking, let's have a new established routine for bedtime? Use this information. Don't just ignore it. Don't walk into your office one day and go, okay, that's it. We're changing everything. We are now going to start from ground zero. Right, all different from this moment on. Because all you'll get is an entire office of panicked people. Instead, remember what you've learned. Introduce that change in tiny increments and spend your time focusing on what will stay the same, not what's going to be changing. And yet that's where we tend to put our energy. We tend to try and persuade people that they're going to like whatever the new change is. You're wasting your time. People people aren't going to like the change, and it doesn't matter what it is. It could be the best change ever. You will get people either sighing all the way to being unable to sleep for the next 6 weeks because they're so worried about what's going to happen. Focus on what stays the same. This is not the time to use the rip off the Band-Aid approach. Now, I know you pretty well because I could be one of you sitting there. And I'm sure there are some of you going, yeah, so what? I have resisted change for a lot of years, and I haven't done too badly. So let's address, so what? Why does it matter whether you resist change or not? As William Pollard said, change is difficult. Not to change is fatal. And that's becoming truer and truer with every passing year. It used to be you'd resist change, change would happen, and you'd be a little behind. And those old ways of doing things would still be there, maybe for your entire life. But the world is changing faster now than at any other time in history, and it will continue to change faster. If you resist change, the world is going to be over here, and suddenly what you've got, what you're doing, will no longer apply, and you will be lost unless you can find a way to catch up. And that's more stressful than the change itself. Don't be like primitive people who only changed because they were forced into it. Instead, embrace change. It is not there to help you anymore. It is just outdated programming. If you want to be a leader of your life, and I would hope that all of you do, then be like the leaders of big companies. They don't wait until new ideas and new inventions are commonplace to leverage them. They're one of the first ones to jump onto the bandwagon. Why do you think I talked about the rip off the Band-Aid approach, and I didn't say rip off the bandage? Band-Aid were cutting edge. They were the very first company to have adhesive bandages. Therefore, Band-Aid, bandage, they're one and the same for us now. It's the same reason why Kleenex is a generic term for tissues. Doesn't matter who makes them. And why people in England hoover their carpets. Hoovers were the first vacuums. If you want to get the most out of your life and your business, your world, you need to override that programming. You need to get with the program by overriding that programming. Don't let yourself worry about the unknown. Remind yourself that you are a survivor. Not all change is good. But if you are just coming from a place of emotional reaction, you can't judge whether it's good or not. By overriding your programming, you can actually come to a place where you can decide. You can make an informed choice whether you want to embrace that new change or not. I'd like you to all commit to choosing to change or not change on purpose. Thank you.